Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. A community is in mourning following the deaths of 5 people in Carman, Manitoba. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre blasted the Trudeau government, saying it needs to be held to account for the ArriveCan app, which cost taxpayers close to $60 million. And we hear from political reporter Brian Lilly, who says recent polls suggest the federal Tories have extended their lead on the Liberals across the country.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. An obituary for a Manitoba woman, her 3 young children, and her niece describes them all as beautiful souls. The bodies of Amanda Clearwater, her children Bethany, Javen, and Isabella, along with niece Maya Lee Grattan, were all found at 3 different crime scenes in and around the town of Carman, Manitoba on Sunday. A neighbor of the family says he's simply stunned.
Oh, I looked out the window at about 3 o'clock or so, and there's a police car out there. And it's, it doesn't have any flashing lights or anything, so it's like, it could be nothing, right? It's just, but it kept all day long. It was like, it's still there, it's still there, it's still there, it's still there. And then after it got dark, everybody else started showing up, forensic trucks and everything else. By that time, it's like, what the heck is going on here? So I just happened to be looking at the Globe and Mail website, and their top story on there was this story from Manitoba. 5 dead in 3 different locations. And like, oh crap! Now I know why all these cars are over there, right? I mean, as far as interaction, I didn't have any interactions, but I seen them playing and running around and stuff like that, and I've seen her a few times. I mean, they seem reasonably normal. I mean, nothing ever happens around here. I mean, really, there's not even any kids or anything else. Like nothing ever happens around here, period.
Well, it's terrible. My heart goes out to the family, to the relatives, to the neighbors, to the schools. Everyone involved. Our whole community is going to be feeling this.
Amanda Clearwater's 29-year-old common law partner, who's the children's father, is being charged with 5 counts of first-degree murder. Federal Housing Minister Sean Fraser says the Trudeau government has now signed more housing deals to help provide affordable housing in over 60 rural communities across the country. He says supporting our smaller towns is very important.
By way of update, we've now signed 36 agreements through the Housing Accelerator Fund that represents over 500,000 new units over the next decade or so. Disproportionately, the agreements that we signed have been in the largest cities in Canada. You'll have seen the agreements that we've reached with cities like Toronto, Vancouver, Calgary, Halifax, and a slew of others across the country. But it's important that we ensure that we continue to support housing growth in small towns and rural communities, like the one that I call home, right across Canada. There is an enormous opportunity in small town Canada and in rural communities to address the housing challenges. When we get it right, the quality of life that people get to enjoy is remarkable.
Controversy over the ArriveCan app was front and center on Parliament Hill yet again. Federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre says Prime Minister Justin Trudeau needs to be held accountable for an app which was supposed to cost around $80,000 but ended up costing taxpayers close to $60 million.
This scam involved taking money that could be used for border security, like scanning the 99% of shipping containers that go without any inspection from our ports with stolen cars, not to mention other things that Canadians could have done with that money. Instead, it stuffed the pockets of 75% of the contractors who did no work. Again, will the Prime Minister admit that the Arrive scam is not worth the cost and not worth the corruption?
I'm surprised that the Leader of the Opposition would mention investing in border security when his government cut 1,000 officers that did the exact kind of work that he's now pretending he wants to invest in, when they eliminated 50% of the intelligence capacity in the Border Services Agency to work with local, provincial police and the RCMP. So, Mr. Speaker, we have no lessons to take in investing in border security from somebody who gutted the Border Services Agency.
According to a number of recent polls, it appears as though the Trudeau Liberals continue to sink in popularity. not just here in Alberta, but across the country, and that includes Quebec. Political reporter and Sun columnist Brian Lilly says the Tories' lead continues to grow at the expense of Justin Trudeau.
Right now, Abacus says that the Conservatives are ahead nationally, 43% voter support to 24% for the Liberals and 18% for the NDP. For the last 6 months, the Liberals have been closer to the NDP than they have been to the Conservatives, and the NDP is not doing well. Then there's another poll from Nanos that just looked at, well, should Justin Trudeau stick around? And the answer was, we don't think so.
Mr. Lilly will also have the latest on the fallout from the ArriveCan app, which ended up costing taxpayers perhaps even more than the $60 million the Auditor General estimated. He'll have details coming up after business news. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation is calling on members of Parliament to pass the original Bill C-234. The bill would exempt carbon tax charged on natural gas and propane farmers use to dry their grain and heat their barns. Now, to chat about this in more detail is the federal director of the CTF, Franco Terrazzano, who joins us from Ottawa. Franco, a report from the Parliamentary Budget Officer shows the Senate's amendments would cost farmers how much by the year 2030?
$910 million. That's how much the Senate's amendments to the original Bill C-234 will cost Canadian farmers by 2030. And look, when the government, with its carbon tax, makes it more expensive for farmers to grow food, it's making it more expensive for families to buy the food. Now, the original relief would take the carbon tax off of natural gas and propane used by farmers to dry their grain and heat their barns, right? That was good. This type of relief has essentially been passed by elected members of Parliament twice, but then the Senate delayed and watered down the bill with amendments. Now, the amendments would mean that there'd be carbon tax relief for drying grain, but not heating barns, and that the carbon tax relief would only be in place for about 3 years. So that means that the Senate's amendments would cost Canadian farmers about $910 million by 2030, and that's why taxpayers are calling all members of Parliament right now to pass the original Bill C-234 and provide relief to Canadian farmers and Canadian families who need affordable food.
So, Franco, what are the next steps? Should maybe farmers and ranchers reach out to their local MPs?
Reach out to your local MPs, like pick up the phone, write some emails. And look, we have to act now because to make matters worse, in less than 2 months' time, the federal government is raising its carbon tax again. Right? So that means even bigger bills for both Canadian farmers and just Canadian individuals every time we go to the gas pumps, whenever we need to use natural gas, propane, or diesel. So folks, we got to act now because in less than 2 months' time, on April 1, the federal government is raising its carbon tax again.
Thanks so much for your time today, Franco. That was Franco Terrazzano, Federal Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, joining us from Ottawa. Ontario Premier Doug Ford says his government will table legislation requiring future provincial governments to hold a referendum before introducing any new carbon pricing plans.
This new law will guarantee that no provincial government can force a costly carbon tax on the people of Ontario without ensuring their voices are heard loud and clear. We're giving the people of Ontario a veto over carbon taxes. People know where I stand on the carbon tax. I've opposed it from the very beginning. My record couldn't be more different than Bonnie Crombie's. She supported the carbon tax right from the start. She's the queen of carbon tax. Even worse, she raised property taxes every year she was mayor. Bonnie has never seen a tax she wouldn't like to hike. The last thing people need right now are higher taxes. They deserve relief. So we're once again calling on the federal government to eliminate their carbon tax.
Alberta's Minister of Immigration and Multiculturalism announced a new program to help address labor shortages in our province's tourism and hospitality sectors. Mohammed Yassin says a new immigration stream beginning March 1st should help address the shortfall, attracting more workers who are desperately needed.
The Alberta Advantage Immigration Program allows Alberta to nominate individuals for permanent residence based on their ability to contribute to our economy and meet our labor market needs. This new stream supplements existing immigration pathways already attracting and retaining international talent to in-demand sectors, but targets workers specifically sought by the tourism and hospitality sector.
Now, government officials say back in 2022, our province saw $10.7 billion in tourism spending, which represented an increase of $600 million from 2019 levels. They say more tourists means much more help that is needed. Cash, bank drafts, and other property seized from one of Lethbridge's largest drug seizures will help to fund community crime prevention projects across the province. Now, that's according to the folks with Alert, who seized over $1 million worth of drugs back on December 20th of 2022. The province's Civil Forfeiture Office brought a court application to forfeit the cash, bank drafts, and a vehicle register to Patrick Rodney as proceeds of drug trafficking. Forfeiture was granted by the Court of King's Bench last month. Rodney faces 20 drug and firearms-related offenses.
The criminal side takes care of the individual. We look more so at the instruments or the proceeds of crime, and if we can take that away from them and fund programs and services throughout the province, that's what our intention is. The results of this investigation identified cash and proceeds of crime and tools of the offense that the offender used. They were seized from the individual, and now we're in the process of funding programs and services that are eligible for grants from the province. We can identify this as proceeds of crime. Sometimes it's an instrument of crime as well, but usually it is proceeds of crime. This is seized from the target, and we identify it as a referral to civil forfeiture because we believe that it is proceeds of crime. We're trying to take the profit of crime away from the individuals. This is one of the ways we do it.
Lethbridge City Council voted unanimously to continue permit-shared micro-mobility services here in our city. That means that e-scooters and e-bikes could be back in Lethbridge later this year. The 2-year pilot with Neuron e-bikes and e-scooters is ending fairly soon. Now, city officials say the micro-mobility service provider will be selected through a competitive process. During the last pilot, Neuron was charged $7,500 to offset estimated costs to the city. Officials say since launching in April of 2022, Neuron users racked up more than 740,000 kilometers here in Lethbridge. They say each e-scooter helped to contribute around $6,300 to the local economy each year. Kindness Week kicked off on Monday. Now, Volunteer Lethbridge was out at Lethbridge College to spread some kindness while handing out cookies and other treats. The organization was at the Centre Court to promote their new website, which will make it easier for those looking to volunteer to find organizations that need help.
There's no better way to be kind than there is to volunteer. Kind to your community and kind to yourself. So we have launched this exciting new volunteer platform that is going to make it so much easier for volunteers to get engaged in their community. Would you believe that at any given time we have about 250 opportunities available? I think most people wouldn't even guess that, right?
For more information, you can visit opportunities.volunteerlethbridge.com. You know, with the rising cost of living these days, it's becoming more and more difficult to treat yourself and your loved one to a romantic date night. Well, for those who are looking to celebrate Valentine's Day on a budget, you need to look no further than Lethbridge College. Chef Stephen Clausen with the School of Culinary Arts says diners can enjoy an experience that is elevated from the normal fare.
We're focusing on still the curriculum that they have to follow, and we're just a little more, like I said, elegance, a little more high-end. So they're working with truffles and saffron and a nice contemporary dessert that they're working with. So it's still certain things that they cover on a regular basis. We're just elevating it a little bit. This is a nice way to write on the little bit more economical side of things. It gives them an experience that like a 5-course meal that they're getting here is a little more economical here at the college, and also too that right, cooking at home, right? Maybe this opens that opportunity up to maybe try some of those things at home that they do get to work with.
Clausen says some of the dishes are not overly complicated to make and could provide some inspiration for those who want to enjoy a classy date at home.
I think everything that we're working with, I think you could execute at home. Like I think that chicken breast is nice, a nice beef fillet, risotto has always been an elegant dish, and they are easy to execute at home. So just find that recipe that you want to try online and give it a whirl. And if it doesn't work, pizza is always a good alternative.
It's a tasty looking menu. Settings for Valentine's Day at the college are sold out, but other spaces are available this week, and you can book your table by visiting the college's Garden Court Dining Room Facebook page. New research by the online gaming group Cassivu has revealed which are Canada's most affordable universities. The study ranked each university based on lowest tuition fees, highest graduation rate, lowest cost of living, and the number of value of scholarships. Now, the post-secondary, which came in at number 1 right at the top, was Memorial University of Newfoundland with a score of 76 out of 100. Brandon University was a close second, however, with a score of 75.46. Rounding out the top 5 were York University at number 3, British Columbia's Simon Fraser University at number 4, and the University of Manitoba at number 5. Unfortunately, no Alberta universities ranked in the top 10. U.S. President Joe Biden welcomed Jordan's King Abdullah II to the White House to discuss how to end the months-long war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. They also discussed how more of the 100-plus hostages could be freed since the October 7th attacks and the plan for Gaza moving forward.
As the King and I discussed today, the United States is working on a hostage deal between Israel and Hamas, which would bring an immediate and sustained period of calm to Gaza for at least 6 weeks, which we could then take the time to build something more enduring. Over the past month, I've had calls with Prime Minister Netanyahu, as well as the leaders of Egypt and Qatar, to push this forward. The key element of the deals are on the table. There are gaps that remain, but I've encouraged Israeli leaders to keep working to achieve the deal. The United States will do everything possible to make it happen.
As Christians, we are often instructed in God's Word to share the good news of the gospel with other people. But for many, this can be kind of an awkward conversation. Abe Locke, a retired pastor here in Lethbridge, shares his thoughts on why talking with others about our faith can be difficult at times.
I think one of the problems is that we don't know our Bible. We maybe attend church once a week, and that's the extent of our Bible study. I teach a Bible study every week, and I kind of give homework and reading for the people because this is an ongoing thing. I cannot expect to talk about farming if I know nothing about farming. I can't expect to be a teacher if I know nothing about how to relate and how to communicate and how to teach. And I think that's one of the big things we're not sure of what we know. But secondly, I don't think many of us as Christians are sure of what we believe.
Abe Locke will also give tips on the do's and don'ts of evangelism. That's coming up in the second half of our program. Well, certain areas in southwestern Alberta saw more flurries again, including right here in Lethbridge, but fortunately, the snow will be dissipating and we'll see a little bit more of the sunshine again soon. A full look at the weather picture is on deck. We enjoyed more of the white stuff again today in Lethbridge and just below the freezing mark. Tonight, expect more snow developing with a low near minus 18. For Valentine's Day Wednesday, it should be mainly sunny and a high expected near minus 8 degrees. Thursday, it'll be partly cloudy with the mercury dropping to minus 11. Friday, the clouds should clear out and we should see a high of around minus 6. Warming up to 0 on Saturday. But look at Sunday. A few clouds developing, but a high near 7 degrees. Monday, sunshine mixed with cloud and a high of 6. Now, the average high for this time of year is +1 with an average low of minus 11. The record high was 13 degrees set back in 1996, and the record low was a very cold minus 33 in 1978. The sun rose at 7:45 and set at 5:47. Looking at the national forecast for Wednesday now, expect sunshine mixed with clouds and a high of 8 degrees for both Victoria and Vancouver, BC. There's a good chance of flurries developing and a high of only minus 7 for Edmonton. Light snow and minus 7 degrees as well for Calgary on Wednesday. Light flurries and minus 5 is on tap for Regina, Saskatchewan. A good chance of snow developing and a high of only minus 9 for Saskatoon. In Winnipeg, expect an overcast sky and a high of minus 4 on Wednesday. In the central part of the country, expect an overcast day as well with a high near the freezing mark in Toronto, clearing and minus 5 in Ottawa, a mixture of sun and cloud and a high of minus 4 for Montreal. In Atlantic Canada, it should be mainly cloudy and minus 4 in Fredericton. Halifax had a winter storm warning today. Tomorrow, more flurries with a high of minus 5. Charlottetown will have periods of snow and a high of minus 4. And in St. John's, Heavy and blowing snow is in the forecast with a high of -1 on Wednesday. Lab-created diamonds come with some sparkling claims that they're ethically made by machines running on renewable energy. Jewelry experts say they are chemically the same as diamonds found in the ground, but cost a fraction of the price. They say this really appeals to younger generations who are having a difficult time making ends meet.
For customers who want to buy a lab-grown diamond with the idea that it's the most sustainable choice, I would suggest that they really research where the lab-grown diamonds are coming from.
In the past, poor quality laboratory-grown diamonds, you could actually identify by eye. But nowadays, by eye, unfortunately, because they're chemically the same material as the natural stones, they're imperceptible. You can't see.
That's a nice-looking diamond. A new report by Morningstar DBRS suggests drivers may see higher premiums for their electric vehicles as the insurance industry adjusts to the shift from fuel-powered cars to electric alternatives. It says costly EVs and higher costs of repairs are likely going to lead the insurance industry to adjust their premiums. The report also suggests Canada's regulated automobile insurance could mitigate drastic rate increases, especially when an EV is registered for the first time. Experts say changes to claims on EVs, however, are not going to affect insurers' profitability or credit ratings in the near to medium term. BlackBerry says more job cuts are on the way as part of the ongoing process to separate two of its business divisions. The Waterloo, Ontario-based tech company says it anticipates more job losses in its cybersecurity business and is also taking steps to exit 6 of its 36 global office locations. BlackBerry says it cut roughly 200 jobs in the third quarter that ended November 30th in an effort to streamline costs while reporting a loss of $21 million US. The company expects to return to positive cash flow by the fourth quarter of its 2025 financial year. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 482 points on the day to finish at 20,584. The Dow was down 524 points to 38,272. The S&P 500 was down 68 on the day to 4953, and the Nasdaq was down 286 points to 15,655. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 94 cents to 77.86 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 9 cents to $1.67 US. Gold was down $26.98 on the day to $19.93.15 US an ounce, and silver was down 58 cents to $22.12 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $8.41 per bushel, barley's at $6.20, canola's at $13, and corn is at $7.49 per bushel. Live cattle were down 50 cents to $183.75. Feeder cattle were down 83 cents to $248. That's for the March contract. And lean hogs were up 65 cents to $74.23. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 73.72 US. Recapping one of our top stories, the Canadian Taxpayers Federation is calling on members of Parliament to pass the original Bill C-234, which would give a further carbon tax break for farmers. Now, this follows the Parliamentary Budget Officer's report showing the Senate's amendments could cost Canadian farmers around $910 million by the year 2030. Well, it appears as though the Justin Trudeau Liberals are dropping even further in the polls. Political reporter and Sun columnist Brian Lilly will have details for us momentarily. Listen, when you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. And if you missed any of our local stories, check out our website, bridgecitynews.ca. The final tab for the ArriveCan app may be anyone's guess. It was supposed to cost around $80,000, but according to the Auditor General, Karen Hogan, it may be as high as $60 million. Now, to chat about this in more detail is political reporter and Sun columnist Brian Lilly, who joins us once again from the Big Smoke. Now, Brian, the Auditor General says consultants received close to $60 million, but in fact, it may be more?
Oh, it's definitely more than $60 million, Hal, because what she was able to determine, and remember, before this, as you said, initial cost was $80,000, and maybe the government had lowballed that. but eventually it got to $54 million. And that's what the opposition kept asking about. Why with this $54 million app? Why did it cost so much? And then Karen Hogan comes out, the Auditor General, and says, well, actually, the consultants alone got $59.5 million.
Wow.
Okay, so that's just the consultants. Now, think about all the civil servants that also worked on this app. How many? I don't know. We don't have that figure. But we do know, thanks to an order paper question that was highlighted by the Canadian Taxpayers Federation last week, 8 different bureaucrats, executive level bureaucrats, just from the Public Health Agency, were assigned to this. 5 of them got bonuses in the first year of the project, even though the app didn't work. 6 of them got bonuses in the second year, even though the app didn't work. Canada Border Services Agency, we don't know how many of those executives got bonuses because we don't have the answer to that question yet. So you've got 8 executives just from one department working on it. How many people under them? Then you've got the larger department that was more in charge of it than Public Health, Canada Border Services Agency. So of course, this cost more than $60 million. But as Karen Hogan, the Auditor General, said, the accounting, the paperwork was so bad that she doesn't know what this actually cost.
Yeah, she said the rules were not followed, Brian. Now, you've called for at least 2 cabinet ministers to be fired over this, but who will actually take the fall?
Well, probably no one. That's the sad part. I don't think that Justin Trudeau is going to throw anyone under the bus over this. But the right thing to do for these ministers is just to submit your resignation because they failed to do their jobs. I'm talking about Bill Blair, who was the Minister of Public Safety at the time. He should have known about this. And if he didn't know about it, he should have been asking questions. This was a major project. This was a priority for the government. You should have been asking questions about this. And the fact that you didn't is a major issue. He was the public safety minister in charge of Canada Border Services Agency. Patty Hajdu is the other one who should be fired. She was the Minister of Public Health, the Minister of Health at the time, and in charge of the Public Health Agency of Canada. Now, they've both been moved off to other departments. Blair is in charge of defense now for reasons that I don't know because he's been a failure at every portfolio he's held at the federal level. And I don't think he was a good police chief in Toronto. And Hajdu is now Minister of Indigenous Services. And, she shouldn't even be in that. They should be fired. The fact that they won't be means that come the next election, Canadians have to hold the whole government to account and fire them. You can't have a project go this far off the rails and not have somebody held to account. If this is how bad it is on one small project, an app, how bad is it on the rest? We know that government spending has gone through the roof, that the number of consultants has gone through the roof, the number of civil servants hired has gone through the roof. Your services are not 40 to 50% better than they were when Justin Trudeau took office. In fact, in many areas, the government simply isn't working. So that's a sign that they need to go because they're not doing their jobs.
Brian, I have to admit that my wife and I use the ArriveCan app like many other Canadians when we travel to a tropical destination a couple of years ago. But is the ArriveCan app still being used today?
It is, and it's being promoted. Now, my understanding, I have not used it on my last few trips out of the country. I've just refused out of principle, and maybe I'm being stubborn. But my understanding is that it works now. I've used the American equivalent. They've got what's called mobile passport control. And you basically upload your information. By the time you get there, and you get a special line, shh, don't tell anyone, you get up to the front of the line and you're through in moments because they've already got the information that they need. They ask you a couple of additional questions and you're through. That's what this should be for ArriveCan, but wasn't back during the pandemic. And I know that the answer from the Trudeau Liberals was, well, it was a pandemic, don't you know, and we had to do things quickly. That's not an acceptable answer, Hal. By the time they started working on this, it was October 2020. It wasn't March 2020. We weren't in full panic mode at that point. And many of the problems happened well after we already had vaccines. So, this idea that, we can just forgive it all because it was a pandemic doesn't hold water. And the bureaucrats have been pushing for this type of mobile passport control app for some time. They used the pandemic as an excuse, and then they failed to follow any rules, and the politicians who are supposed to oversee them didn't do their jobs. That's why Bill Blair, Patty Hajdu have to be fired, and if Justin Trudeau won't do it, we should fire him.
Brian, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau used some very colorful language recently responding to Bell Media's layoff announcement of around 4,800 employees. Now, you say he's actually playing the media and Canadians should be upset with him over his media policies. Can you explain?
Well, so first off, the 4,800 layoffs, that's not Bell Media, but that's what he makes it sound like. And that's what the government continues to push. The 4,800 layoffs are Bell Canada enterprises. Less than 10% of that, so less than 480, are actually in Bell Media. Most of them are engineers. They're software designers. They are administrative clerks. They are people who would lay the fiber cable, the linemen that would lay the fiber cable to your home or to the new development that you hope to move into one day. Those are most of the people losing their jobs. But Justin Trudeau used this and tried to say that this was all Bell Media and then attacked them, while the simple fact is that a lot of the policies that the Trudeau government has either supported or brought in are actually hurting the media. So look at Bill C-18. That's the Online News Act. If they were not so aggressive, Facebook would not have left the Canadian marketplace. We are, as far as I understand, the only Western country where Facebook has left the marketplace completely. You cannot share Canadian news on Facebook or Instagram in Canada. You can get that same content if you're in the States. One of my colleagues was just down in Florida and said, all of a sudden I'm seeing Canadian news links in my Facebook feed. And they can't believe it. But they've exited here. There could have been a better solution, but they were antagonistic. You look at the regulations on the CRTC for cable and satellite providers. Well, what are people doing these days, Hal? They're cutting the cord. They're going to streamers. They're going to Netflix, Paramount Plus, Disney Plus, all these different streamers. Well, most of them are not paying the same taxes in Canada that the cable and satellite providers are. And they said, well, wait a minute. Like, why are we paying the taxes when they're not? Either cut ours or make them pay the same. That's a valid argument. Have a level playing field for people offering the same product, but they wouldn't do that. You look at where the Trudeau government puts their advertising. 71% of federal government advertising went into digital. They spent as much on search engine advertising with Google as they did with every TV station and network in the country last fiscal year. It's unbelievable. So they say one thing, they do another, and their policies are actually about keeping in place the old system that isn't working anymore in favor of, developing something new that will change with the times. So the Trudeau government is absolutely part of the problem. They just don't see it that way.
And, circling back to Bill 18 for just a moment, C-18, Brian, it's true. We built up organically close to 45,000 followers on our Facebook page, which isn't bad for our news organization, but a lot of our Canadian viewers, they're not seeing the content, so they're going to YouTube, following us on X, formerly Twitter, and so forth, and our website as well. Now, Brian, NDP MP Charlie Angus last week announced a new private member's bill to deal with what he's calling misleading advertising. Now, you say that this is really an attack on free speech and our oil and gas industry? Tell me more about Bill C-372.
Well, it's an attack on speaking the truth as well. Charlie Angus's bill would make it illegal for someone to say that one fossil fuel is cleaner, better for the environment than the other. Now, I'm going to say a true fact to you right now. And under Charlie Angus's bill, if this had been passed, and it's never going to pass, thankfully, but if it was passed and became law, what I'm about to tell you would be illegal. And that is simply this, Hal. Heating your home with natural gas is better for the environment than heating your home with an oil furnace or burning coal. That should not be controversial. That should not be illegal. That is a statement of fact. Even the Trudeau government's carbon tax regime puts a lower price on emissions from natural gas than it does from oil or coal because it is a cleaner burning fuel. Not just on greenhouse gas emissions, by any standards, it's a cleaner burning fuel. But Angus's bill would make that illegal. it would make it illegal for you to get any sort of loyalty reward points. So, I've got an Esso near me, and so I can get PC Optimum points. Well, that would become illegal under this. There are, just advertising your gasoline brand and saying, come to my service station instead of the other one. That would become illegal. And then they would have regulations limiting the size of your sign at your gas station in terms of your brand and the price. They would allow you to have your brand and your price for now. But eventually, just like smoking, they would take that away. So you couldn't even have your brand, maybe just your price, for a gas station. It is an utterly insane bill that has no place in this country, but Charlie Angus thinks that this is what we need at this moment.
CBC President Catherine Tate has been in the news quite a bit lately, talking about the fact that bonuses are not off the table for executives with a public broadcaster, even after the announcement that hundreds would be laid off. Now, Brian, Tate is under more fire here over expenses. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, after lecturing MPs like Rachel Thomas, who questioned her about the bonuses, and she told all the MPs, "Oh no, we don't give bonuses. We give at-risk pay and performance pay. That's different than a bonus." No, it's not. She's under fire because she was racking up expenses. She likes to fly business class. She likes to fly first class. And so going down to LA, she's flying business class. Going to Europe, she's flying business class. $120,000 in expenses. She's crying poor for the entire network. And meanwhile, she's out there flying in at the jet setting class. She is still keeping bonuses on the table for executives while saying that, regular people have to lose their jobs. 800 positions are being eliminated. Now, about 200 of those, when they announced this, 200 were already vacant. And lots of companies will do that, right? You try and say, all right, we're not going to replace the people that have already left, and we'll shuffle those around, and then we're going to cut jobs. But they're still cutting 600 actual people. So, how can you justify giving bonuses? And I would say the same thing about my company. And the CEO of Post Media knows that. I would denounce that and say, that's wrong. But that's what CBC is doing. It defies logic for this government entity to continually say that they have no money and then find ways to spend money well outside of the core mandate while saying, well, we can't fulfill our core mandate because we don't have enough money.
Brian, the latest polls show that despite the attacks on Pierre Poilievre, the Trudeau government is not winning back any voters. How bad are things getting for Prime Minister Justin Trudeau?
So a couple of polls out recently, Hal. One was from Abacus Data, and it showed a 19-point lead for the Conservatives. There's only been two that I think in the last several months that have shown that. One was Nanos, and one was Abacus. So right now, Abacus says that the Conservatives are ahead nationally, 43% voter support to 24% for the Liberals, and 18% for the NDP. For the last 6 months, the Liberals have been closer to the NDP than they have been to the Conservatives, and the NDP is not doing well. Then there's another poll from Nanos that just looked at, well, should Justin Trudeau stick around? And the answer was, we don't think so. The answer was only, I believe it was only 3% think he should lead the Liberal Party into the next election. 39% thought he should go. A bunch didn't know. Some said, well, another leader might help. Very much a dog's breakfast, but not many people supporting Justin Trudeau on sticking around. So, he spent a lot of time attacking Pierre Poilievre, trying to compare him to Donald Trump. Both Nanos and Abacus came out with polls this week saying, you know what, these attacks, they're not working. In fact, let me give you this quick data point to explain how bad it is. The Abacus poll had the Conservatives ahead of the Liberals in Quebec. Now, it was only 1 point. It was 26% for the Conservatives, in second place behind the Bloc, just over 30, and then the Liberals at 25. That's margin of error stuff. But the fact that we're even talking about the idea that the Conservatives would be ahead of the Liberals in Quebec in this day and age, that is something damning for them. Can you imagine me saying, well, how the Liberals are ahead of the Conservatives in Alberta? That would be shocking, and that would be a wake-up call for the Conservatives. This should be a wake-up call for the Liberals. Sadly, doesn't look like Justin Trudeau's getting the message that he should follow in his father's footsteps and take that walk in the snow.
Political reporter and Sun columnist Brian Lilly, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Hal.
Part of the Christian faith is an understanding that God has instructed his followers to share the gospel with others in order to evangelize. Many would argue, however, that it's easier said than done. Joining us today to discuss evangelism in the 21st century is Abe Locke, a retired pastor here in Lethbridge. Abe, welcome back to Bridge City News.
Thank you very much. It's been a while.
Yeah. So why does it seem so difficult for many Christians to share their beliefs with others? Is it maybe our own insecurities?
Well, I have to think of what is the meaning of evangelism. First of all, you see, many of us are confused with the term evangelism, and that's why we don't evangelize. We have evangelists in the past, people like Billy Graham, Billy Sunday, the Satara twins, and the list goes on and on, all the time. These are people that have been specifically called to do evangelism as a full-time thing. But what you're talking about is for us as individual believers to be a so-called evangelists, but we will never be the professional evangelists, and that scares us. And we say, well, I can't do it. These guys have it, they know how to do it, they know their Bible and all the rest of that stuff. And so you're right, we live in fear of sharing because we compare ourselves to these evangelists. God hasn't called us all to be that kind of an evangelist. He wants us to evangelize who we are, where we are, in our circumstances, within the group of people that we live. And I think that makes a big difference to how people respond to the term evangelism.
Now, do we tend to think that our neighbors and coworkers are probably not interested in knowing or hearing about Jesus and his saving grace?
I think we think about that a lot, and that means that we haven't developed a proper relationship with them. If we get a relationship with them on a very comfortable one-to-one basis, so we can begin to talk about anything, then we can also talk about Jesus and about what he means and about our belief system. I often think that we're concerned because we don't know the Bible well enough, and that's very true. But you know, I've discovered one of the things that is most effective in my life as an evangelist, or as somebody who is evangelizing, is the fact that if I share what God has done for me, it's very hard for people to argue with that. It's very hard for them to be put aside by that because it's my experience. And when people share their experience, others tend to listen and pay attention.
So, Abe, what do you say to someone who thinks that they need to have all of the right answers before sharing about Jesus? Is it that we have to know our Bible, so all of the answers are right in there?
I think one of the problems is that we don't know our Bible. We maybe attend church once a week, and that's the extent of our Bible study. I teach a Bible study every week, and I kind of give homework and reading for the people because this is an ongoing thing. I cannot expect to talk about farming if I know nothing about farming. I can't expect to be a teacher if I know nothing about how to relate and how to communicate and how to teach. And I think that's one of the big things we're not sure of what we know. But secondly, I don't think many of us as Christians are sure of what we believe. I have said to my Bible study group, for example, you should work at getting up one sentence to explain your faith. For example, I go back to Paul. What did Paul say? Paul said, we preach Christ crucified, hung on the cross, died, rose again, and is at the right hand of the Father, interceding for us. You've got it in a nutshell. So learn a couple of thoughts like that you can approach a person with, and you'll feel much more secure, and they will know you believe what you're saying.
How about approaching a conversation with a stranger and planting a seed for Christ? How do you really approach that?
Well, I used to, when I was a teacher back then, I used to go golfing every once in a while. And I would go alone deliberately so that they would pair me up with 2 or 3 other people on the course in order to have a group out there. And I loved that because as we got to go, we would just chatter, and I would eventually ask them what they did for a living and how they could be on the golf course in the middle of the day or whatever. And they would share with me, and invariably, they would feel the pressure to ask me what I did. And I would say, well, I'm a salesman. Oh, what in the world do you sell? And I said, well, I sell the good news, and I sell something that's very special to me. And then I would begin to tell them what the good news is. Would be a natural end for me just to discuss it with them. And sometimes they would simply say to me, I don't want to hear another word. And I would say, well, that's fine. But I just needed to tell you what my belief system is, because we all have one.
Now, what do you say to somebody who tells you, you know what, Abe, I really don't believe in sin?
Yeah, well, I would quote some scripture to them. That's one way. But secondly, I met up with people like this at the university. And I would say, okay, if you don't let me talk about the Bible, that's my basis. And so I'm sorry, we really don't have a baseline to communicate. I said, if you want me to listen to some of the things that you believe in, I'm prepared to do that. However, I expect you then also to respect my belief system so we can have a discussion.
You know, I once had a conversation with someone who didn't know Jesus, and this person said to me that she didn't believe that Jesus was the only way to our Heavenly Father. She says, you know what, as long as we're good people, God loves us all, we'll end up in heaven. But Abe, it even says right in the Bible, no one comes to the Father except through Christ.
That's right. I had a fellow that said to me, well, Mr. Block, I think as long as you're on the bus, you're okay. It doesn't matter which bus you take. And I said, well, would that be good for you to get on any bus if you want to go to California, but it's going up to the Yukon? Well, he said, no, that wouldn't work. And I said, well, it's the same way here. You got to get on the right bus to get to the right destination, or you won't get there.
What are some of the benefits of asking good questions in a conversation with a non-believer?
Very crucial. And I think for me, the key is to build a relationship. If you don't have a relationship, it's like coming in a fog. I mean, the fellow doesn't know where you're coming from, or the person. If you have a little bit of a relationship, at least already, you build up a trust factor. And as you build up a trust factor, they will feel badly if they shut you out. They will let you say a few things at least. And I think it's very crucial to build up a trust factor. I was chairman, for example, of the condo association that we are here. So one of the things I tried to do was let the people know, I love to fix things. If you need help, call me. And that was the beginning of relationships where they trusted to just call me to help them, and that would lead to something else.
Do we, as church-going Christians, perhaps maybe spend a little too much time hanging out with believers, fellow believers? I mean, if we really believe that we should be sharing the good news about Christ, then it stands to reason that we should be making more of an effort to reach out to our community, maybe even volunteer?
Absolutely. You see, the thing is with church, and a lot of people have told me, I don't need the church. I've got the Bible and that's fine. No, I'm sorry. You do need the church. The Bible says very clearly, forget not the gathering of the saints, because that's where our encouragement comes from. That's where our support comes from. However, that's not the battlefield. The church is the place where you learn, where you get encouragement, where you get built up, so that when you do meet the others, and how can you evangelize if you're not meeting with people that aren't believers? Jesus went and met with the sinners. That's where he went. And we can't evangelize unless we have sinner friends with whom we have built a relationship, with whom we can communicate, and then the support of the church and the knowledge of the Bible goes with us as we communicate with them.
Let's talk about fellowship then, about building up other believers and helping to inspire them, especially if they want to go out and evangelize, because no man or woman is an island, right? You need that love and support.
You absolutely do. And I think that God gives us occasions when people say, well, I have no opportunities to talk to non-believers. Wow. God is giving us all kinds of opportunities. We just need to realize them. The other thing I think about is my motto has been, see where God is working and then go and join him. But that takes initiative, and we need to make a decision to do that. And so as we communicate with these people, I think an understanding of where they are coming from is also important. Do I know what they've gone through? Can I relate to the specifics in their life that have been difficult? My present wife and I, we both lost our spouses many years ago. Oh. And you know, it's interesting. When you go through that, it's amazing how people that know that will come and try and communicate with you because they want that encouragement, they want that fellowship, because they know you will understand.
So reaching out to non-believers as well, is it really important to be a sounding board for someone, especially if they're hurting or maybe did lose a loved one, like you just mentioned?
Absolutely. I think, and that's another thing with evangelism. The first thing we have to do is listen. I need to know where people are coming from. I need to understand why they're talking to me the way they are. And if I don't understand that, I'm going to respond in an incorrect way and maybe give them advice that they don't need. I know, for example, I've done a lot of funerals in my life. And one of the things I have experienced from a lot of the people that have talked to me, they've come with the idea, oh, I've had all these people quote scripture to me. I don't want to hear scripture. I want fellowship. I want company. I want somebody to sit with me. I always encourage people, when you are trying to help people like that, don't go and say, give me a call if you have a need. It never works. They're not going to call you. What you do is you go. That's all. You go and knock on the door and bring some food, or you go and you sit with them and cry with them. You just go, because they're going to not respond. And so I think it behooves us to make the move. And you know what? For somebody like me, who is an assertive personality, that's easier than for somebody who's very shy, very inverted and stuff like that. So I don't say it's easy. I just think these are things that we can all work at within how God has created us.
So Abe, what would you list as maybe the top 3 do's and don'ts when it comes to evangelism?
Don't preach. They don't want to hear that. Listen very carefully. And thirdly, share your testimony, which is not a threat. Quoting Bible, and you'll get to that point. You need to. But we often say, well, all you have to do is live a life. That's very important, because you will be the only Bible they will ever read. But eventually, you're going to have to share the gospel with words as well. They go together.
Do you think tracts are still an effective tool for evangelism?
It depends on the area of the world. I know that in some areas of the world, I have heard people are still using tracts. Matter of fact, in some areas, you have these big evangelism meetings still happening. In North America, that's not happening very much anymore, but in other parts of the world, it is. And if it's an appropriate tract, I think it can be very effective. For example, well, they used to be called the Gideons. They're not that anymore. But I know that they have found new ways. They have a magazine now that they put out. Well, people see the magazine and they take it and they read it, because there's a lot of good stuff in there. But it's not a tract, it's a magazine. And I know that they put out the Gospel of John, and they've got around in our area, and they put them into places that will allow them to be placed. And they're free. And it's amazing how many people will walk into a store and see something that's free and they'll grab it. And I think these kinds of things are very important, to try and put places in place where people are comfortable taking it.
Let's talk about missions trips and evangelizing overseas. How important is that today in the 21st century?
Yeah, good question. It depends, I think, on how it's done. I think we have a lot of groups that go to different parts of the world, especially with young people, and they try and give them experiences and training in evangelism. I think that's an excellent way to do it. There's no better way than get your feet wet in certain areas and begin to share the gospel. I think that's very important. And so I think there are many areas in the world that are still very open to that. I'm not sure it's quite as effective in North America. We have become rather self-sufficient. We don't need God, and so I don't need you is the attitude. I can make it on my own until they have a catastrophe or an accident or an illness or something. And then all of a sudden, they might sit and listen. So if we find out those things, we can be a part of that. And that's mission work at home, and that can be mission work abroad. And we have a lot of missionaries that are still going out there and meeting people who haven't heard the gospel or don't want to hear it.
You know what I find really interesting as well? When I was a kid, I'd always hear stories about a lot of North American pastors, preachers going out to different countries in Africa to evangelize. Now those African nations are actually sending missionaries back to North America to evangelize. Because like you said, many in North America, it's all about themselves and self-centeredness and taking the focus off of God. So that's very interesting right now.
Yeah, it is. I remember watching television. There's an ad that I hate when I watch television, and it's an ad advertising things for women, facial, et cetera, et cetera. And they always conclude with the comment, and you are worth it. And I'm thinking, that's the concept that we have in our world. We're worth it. So, serve me. It's me, myself, and I. And that's contrary to where the scripture wants us to go.
Yep, you're worth it is an entirely different meaning when you talk about Jesus dying on the cross. We were definitely in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Retired Pastor A. Block, thanks so much for the chat today about evangelism.
You are very welcome. It's a part of my life, and I enjoy it and love it. God bless.
God bless you as well. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. Thanks so much for watching.